Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we have Vladimir Baranov with us, and he's going to give the correct pronunciation because he was explaining to me before the show how to properly pronounce it, and I said, I'm going to turn that over to you to do. But Vladimir has spent the past 20 years in startup and technology industries across all kinds of different spaces. He is the founder and has executive roles that have exposed him to many meaningful experiences. Vladimir, welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your day in the beautiful Ithaca area. You could be out visiting a waterfall, but you chose to spend some time with us and our listeners. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you've ended up where you are.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amos. And I think you did quite wonderful pronunciation of my name. I started out actually, in retrospect, my journey seems to be somewhat straightforward, but it wasn't when I was making the decisions I was. It was a journey of looking for the area of the greatest impact of, like Archimedes said, is like, if you have a stick long enough in the proper place of pivot, then you can move the earth. I was growing my stick, which was my experience, but I realized that I didn't have the pivot point in the right place, and that's where my journey took me. Started out as an electrical engineer. I spent 8 years in banking, building technical trading systems, and I realized that when you work for for a large organization, no matter what you do, unless you're at the very top, you most likely not being impactful, whether you do a great job or if you do a terrible job. If you do a fantastic job, you don't get noticed. And if you take a workation for 2 months, it also doesn't get noticed or penalized. You still get rewarded the same. Got my MBA because I wanted to make a difference in that situation, but that made no impact whatsoever. But it got me exposed to a structured way of doing entrepreneurship. I started my first startup then, did a peer-to-peer lending startup for about 6 months that didn't take off. But at the same time, I met somebody with whom we started a wealth management SaaS startup, which we took from 2 people to about 150. Eventually, the company was sold to a larger financial company. After having spent 15 years in finance, I realized that while it was impactful in startup, the industry itself was not meaningful to me. I felt like I was building just a really big spreadsheet over this 15 years, and I didn't feel like I made impact on humanity with my work. I shifted into aerospace, which I thought was the most overlapping things for my skills, and also felt, well, it was kind of cool to do sci-fi stuff, and ended up building a few space instruments which went to space. Was coding it, as part of being a third person in startup, which we grew to 35 people, and I thought this is where it's at. But then I realized that space is 95% government, so in the market. So in the sense that in order to be impactful there, you either have to have hundreds of billions of dollars, like Musk or Bezos, or you need to spend about 20, 30 years in the government or space position in order to be influential. And that didn't seem to me like a path that I was willing to walk on or like available to me. And thus I ended up in a place of coaching because my thought process took me to a place that I have all this experience in deep technology and as being a founder, being an executive. And a lot of technologists, a lot of founders are struggling with getting their solutions to the market. They're also struggling with communication and soft skills. And if our technologists, our masters, our PhD people are the smartest people on this planet, why don't we enable them more with their human skills, with the soft skills, in a way that can make them a lot more productive and bring the greatness that is in their heads out into the world? And if I have a portfolio of those people working in different industries, I can basically optimize my time spent in the most way that I can multiply the impact on human technological progress. Now, I don't have a huge ego where I need to be at the center of attention there, but if I move it by 0.25% over the whatever 30, 40 years remaining of my professional career, I can go down in the ground satisfied.
Awesome. John Maxwell said once, I saw him speak recently, and I think there were about 1,500 people in the room. And he said, if he could only bump each one of us in the room up a half an inch, think of the impact. And so I like what you said there, that, if you can bring everybody up that you work with just a little bit, think of the impact. Now, I do find it somewhat interesting. You were in financial tech, and then you went to space tech. Are there similarities there between the financial world and outer space? Now, some of us probably would say absolutely, because we don't understand the financial world. But it seems like, to me, an interesting jump. Were there similarities?
Interesting. I'd say there were similarities between larger organizations in how much bureaucracy had slowed down innovation. Now, I'm not a big critic of bureaucracy. Like, it needs to be there for organizations of certain size in order to be productive with such a large number of people. I'd say that would be number one similarity. The difference would be, which was actually discovered for me in the very beginning, is why people were in the industries that they were. When I was doing kind of discovery interviews with people in aerospace, when I was still in finance, I asked them the question, like, let's say if you were not doing, first of all, I'll say that in fintech or in finance, almost everybody has a backup career, in a sense that if they were not doing finance, they would be doing X, Y, and Z. And I kind of asked the same question of the people in aerospace. If you were not doing aerospace, what would you be doing? They were looking at me like as a deer in a headlight. What do you mean a backup career? This is it. I'm 100% in, which showed me that there is a different culture in the aerospace industry than it was in finance. While people in finance, a lot of them are doing it because, most likely because of the compensation, and most of them say that out loud themselves. People in aerospace, even though they may be underpaid compared to people in finance, they know that they're very extremely passionate about the things that they do.
That is fascinating. I've never thought about it, in those terms, but specifically over the past 30 years, I mean, there have been issues within finance. I mean, different things that have happened. We had the housing bubble, you had the dot-com burst, and all of those things lead back to finance in some way, shape, or form. So how do you believe, thinking about the fact that most of those people have a backup career, they have a backup plan, as opposed to in the space industry, everybody's 100% in. Was it harder to get a team motivated and moving in the finance industry because they kind of thought, well, or was it easier? How was the motivation of a team from one industry to the other? Did you ever notice any differences?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I would say I'll actually start with aerospace, and I would say that it was much easier to motivate the team in aerospace because you actually did not have to motivate the teams in aerospace because they knew exactly what we're doing. We know exactly what we're going for. Now, the final stage, the vision, yes. But in betweens, obviously there was operations, there were human interactions, there were human communications that had to be worked out. But the vision was always clear, right? Getting people off the earth, and maybe we're playing a very small part, but we know which direction we're moving. With finance, I think it's a little bit harder to motivate people. Like, what brings you to work? Money. What brings you to work? Maybe solving difficult problems. What brings you to work? Maybe because you like spending time with me. What brings you to work? Maybe you like the coffee in the office. It starts being a little bit more utilitarian than about having a bigger mission. Now, yes, there are some companies in finance which have a bigger mission. Let's say those which make, subprime loans to developed countries, and probably some of those loans are not going to come back because they're trying to develop their economy. I totally understand that, and there is place for that. But majority of the companies, especially the companies that are making a lot of monies, do not have such a mission and do not have such a vision for the future when they're working. So I'd say like the only thing that motivates that kind of crew is maybe difficult problems, maybe money. And I realized in the end that that's not something I want to be associated with.
Interesting. So you talk some in your work about communication. How often when you go in to coach a team or go into work with a team, are you finding that there are communication issues?
I'm going to say all the time, and that's not being like fictitious, or is it not being like everybody's wrong? It's because anytime you bring a third-party observer in a context that has been kind of cooking for a while, you're going to start noticing things. Is going to start noticing things which are now part of a culture, versus actually are the things that need to be corrected. It kind of just kind of got absorbed in the sense like it is what it is, without people considering that, hey, that might not be the best way of doing things.
So what are some common strategies that you would use in fostering better communication? And
yeah.
And also, I'll add a second piece of that. Because of your experience, does it differ any when you're working and trying to foster communication between technical and non-technical people?
Yeah. And I'd say like both of those can be talked about for like maybe hours. So communications is a very broad topic, but I will try to answer that more specifically. In the end, there is and I'm sure you're familiar with this concept of us having models of each other in our minds.
Yes.
And what communication does, it aligns and refreshes those models with new data. So I'm telling you some words, you're changing either the perception of me, perception of the problem we're working on, perception of another person that maybe we're talking about. And through that communication, there could be errors, there could be biases, there could be interpretations that are not being always voiced out. We are kind of always taught to believe that we know what we're talking about, no matter like in what communication. And if somebody tells you like you're wrong, there's nothing wrong with the language you use. It's just about the factual facts. It's just the nature of the data. But I do know, and I myself know, when I communicate with my spouse, when I communicate with my children, I make mistakes all the time. Now, none of those mistakes are done on purpose, and none of those mistakes are done on purpose in a corporate environment. But being self-aware that mistakes in communications can happen, that bits and bytes and words can be dropped, words can be misinterpreted, provides a level of self-awareness which helps those models in our heads of others and other concepts be more refined and be more accurate if we're self-aware of those things. If we introduce mitigating measures that help us keep those models current. One of those mitigating measures is a very simple one, is where, let's say, if you are in an important business meeting and you need to make sure to capture everything that the other party has communicated to you, one, you can verbally communicate back to them what you heard, and let's say if it's not appropriate in the current meeting, it's good to actually just write an email summary of how you understood things. And that prevents about 50 to 80% of miscommunications of original state, because you're able to capture how you understood it, and you also share it with the other party. And chances are the other party, once they read it, they will send back to you something. But again, it should not be perceived that, hey, you're wrong, or you heard something wrong. It's you are aligning the data that both of you are observing. You're kind of crossing your sensors and making sure that data is in sync, and then you can move forward. Now, if the communication is not there, if the errors are perpetuating themselves and people are not being self-aware, the bigger the team, the more issues that will come up, and the less likely that that team is going to succeed, because they're not able to rein in that data disconnect.
So to go a step deeper, and to be fair in this question, I will give just a little bit of background. Part of what I do, and I think probably every coach, consultant that's out there spends some time working with their clients on communication. I have also, I work a great deal with folks on the difference between communication and connection, and how they can connect better as well as communicate. And do you believe that it is important within a team that the team leader takes time to connect to actually, get to know the team members. Do you believe that is also important, or is it more important to stay just to make sure that the communication is accurate?
Yeah, no, it's good. If you don't mind, I will rephrase the answer with the word which I think you did not bring up, which is the word context. And when we say let's get to know each other, I'd say in the corporate environment, sometimes it would seem that it's inappropriate. Why do we need to know what if somebody has 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, 1 dog, 3 cats? What a better way of saying is that let's learn each other's context. Because if we make a digital analogy, the large language model, when they're trained, they can only output the things that they know about, and they're also limited within the memories they have and data has been put in. Now, I know I'm comparing humans to LLMs, but it works with the easiest analogy because we can talk to LLMs and we have noticed the problems that can come up. And sometimes those models can hallucinate. And they hallucinate because they didn't have a specific training set. Now, if I've never visited Ghana and somebody assumes that I visited Ghana, they would be communicating with me in a way that drops that knowledge that I'm not able to process. So by us connecting beforehand and learning about my context, learning about details around my family, learning about how I grew up, what are my likes and dislikes, the other person is able to tune their communications to the way that I can understand things better. Now, we can also be in a team which is very dictatorial, and maybe the manager wants to be understood better than anybody else, but still, it's still true, where then the manager is responsible about sharing everything about their context, about their background, or individuals need to be taking out the manager and learning about everything about them. So then there's a unique, not accent, but the type of a language that could be used within the team so everybody is on the same page.
Got it. So you also talk a good bit about cultural and operational alignment. Can you explain a little bit about what you have seen there and some steps maybe that we can take within a team to have cultural alignment?
Right. So I think it goes back to the business you're in. So everybody needs to be on the same page, knowing how we are bringing value. If you are in a fast food, you know that the food needs to be delivered in a specific format to each customer that comes to the door. And if you employ people who are deep thinkers, or you have process which requires deep thought as part of that process, it's not going to be productive because it counters the business mission. And if culturally everybody, again, is a more deep thought person, you don't have the business vision that you initially wanted to achieve. On the other side, if, let's say, you have a sauna or spa business, but you employ people who are very fast thinkers, they're not deep thinkers, and they cannot take time slow and provide the client with a massage or provide a client with a meditation that they need to have over a long period of time. They don't have patience for it. Again, you're going against the business mission. The business mission will be the first one that you need to establish because that's why you're there in the first place. We're all working operationally and culturally to solve that business need. And from there, you kind of need to understand, are you aligned with the business mission? Do you want to solve it? Are you for it? Maybe you're there just for the money, but even if you're there just for the money, you still have to be operating in ways that aligns your efforts in the same way that the business wants to make money or wants to produce the impact. If you're a nonprofit, aligned with the business mission. So you're looking for those things like operational attributes and cultural attributes, and you create an inventory of how you define the business mission. You look at your roles and you look at the other roles in the team and how they all align from their individual responsibilities to the business mission. If some of those don't align, let's say you have a writer working on the Formula One tire changing job, those are not very aligned. Now, doesn't mean that it's a bad person and we need to fire them. There is a gap there that needs to be either filled with training or experience or something else, and we need to adjust those attributes to make sure that person is compatible for the job, and they also desire to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So And I'm thinking about, specifically startups, because startups are happening many times rapidly. And once they take off and they start to grow, what are some tips on how do you still continue to keep people culturally aligned with the business when it's so fast paced? Because sometimes, I mean, we've seen startups that get started and they don't even have a mission yet. I mean, they do, but as it's growing, things are starting to change and turn a little bit. So how do you keep that aligned?
Got it. So there is a concept in startup, urgent has higher priority than important. And to some degree, culture takes a backseat when the execution is priority, especially if there is a lot of work and it's already happening on its own. So nobody starts thinking about hunger if there's a ton of food on the table, and if everything is working well, nobody's focusing in it. It's like nobody's asking for a coach when their revenues are going through the roof. They have what they need because the revenue is covering all the mistakes, and it would be really hard for the company to prioritize any cultural alignment. The problem starts to happen when you don't have enough revenue and you need to start optimizing things for the way the company works. And this is when you start looking into individuals who have built the company and who are the definitional pillars of the culture that is in the company. And this is where you start noticing the rifts, because again, during times of abundance, though rifts are overlooked, they're prioritized because everybody's getting paid well and you have great revenues. But once the revenues start coming down, those rifts, those gaps start identifying themselves, and this is a good time to actually start analyzing that culture and bring it together. I think optimizing culture initially, unless you have some rifts, is what I would call probably a premature optimization. Now, I'm a big proponent of team contracts, but I'm more of a proponent of like 4 bullets on those contracts in the beginning than having 5 pages on it, because you really don't know how well or which way you guys are going to go together as you're working together. So culture is being defined in the soup of experience together, and over a specific time, either the time of success or the time of like trajectory that's clipping towards the failure, that culture gets created. But it only really gets addressed once there is a big rift or there is an actual problem.
So I think that kind of leads into my next question, which is, as a business is growing, and this could be applied as well, even inside of an existing business, where the best operator is promoted. Excuse me, the best operator is promoted to become the supervisor. What are the steps, or a few steps, that you would coach someone on how do you get, for instance, a technical person that maybe has started their own company to start to think like a leader and think strategically as opposed to thinking operationally?
It's a good question. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the answer back. I think thinking strategically in startups is a luxury until a certain point of stability. Because stability implies that there is predictability, and you can now take out your Excel spreadsheets and start planning things as going to happen in the future. And you can step away from the operational role and from tactical responsibilities, from putting out fires, because there are no more fires. And you can give yourself luxury to start planning ahead for maybe 6 months at a time instead of 2 weeks. But I think if your horizon is only 2 weeks, thinking strategically is a bit of an optimization that you cannot afford at the moment. And even if you go ahead and then spend the time, that most likely is going to be wasted, unless it is again, if it's 3 bullet points for the 6 months ahead, which probably most of them are going to be wrong, that you're giving yourself a slight direction. But over time, when the time of stability comes, you can take out your spreadsheet, you can start thinking more long-term. But I don't think it's possible when you are building and when you're delivering. Now, if you have failed your current hypothesis, or like the hypothesis you're trying to validate with the market is not getting validated, in that moment, yes, you have to rethink it, but it's still tactical because you still need to come up with three different. Well, I guess it's this very, very, very short-term strategic, but I feel like very short-term strategic borderlines tactical. So I feel
Yes.
like the blur there. Even when you're failing in your initial startup, you have to come up with three hypotheses, five additional hypotheses, which you need to go out and test. So you come up quickly with hypothesis, you go out, test, you bring back the results and see what things you can commit to, and you start working on that, and then you maybe pivot or you don't. So I'd say my initial statement still stays true, and I'm going to claim that short-term strategy is still tactical.
Got it. So, as I'm listening to you talk, I mean, the example that comes to my mind, excuse me, is, every startup goes through something similar. And it doesn't matter if you're a tech company or you're a coaching company, like our companies, right? You start out, you have, we'll go with coaching. You have clients and you're doing work and at the beginning of that, it's pretty grueling, right? You're trying to churn everything out. You're doing all the different things that you need to be doing. And you're 6 months in, and then one day you realize like, oh, my payment terms aren't as what they should be. And I'm not getting paid quick enough. And now that I'm growing just a little bit, I don't have enough money. Or, it could very easily just be, well, I had one client drop and now all of a sudden. So back to your earlier example, when the money's coming in and you're paying all your bills and you're paying all your people and all of those things are happening fine, you're not thinking about, hey, are my payment terms just, exactly the way they should be? Should I be stretching this out? Should I have some payments in the beginning of the month? You get the gist. What would be your recommendation to somebody that is at that point? How do you not allow it to pull you down, but allow it to continue to propel you forward?
One is definitely having an inventory of problems, because once things are out of our heads and our to-do lists, sometimes they get forgotten and let go. And sometimes they can be addressed later so that your current mind can be focused on the problem at hand. Number two, you can always, even though in the moment something might not be working, you can always create a plan and a timeline by which you're going to fix the thing. Let's say if your retainer is not what you have right now, but it's operationally difficult to address it, what is the time that you can? Because that way you can put your mind at ease that even though you might be at a little bit of pain now, you can have that conversation in the future and maybe schedule it and say like, hey, let's review our contract at some point, but still continue delivering now. But I would say it's basically having a cleanup of your mind priorities and putting them in the right pockets where they still could be addressed at a later stage, if that makes sense. So you can focus on the deliverable now.
Yep, that does make sense. So thinking specifically of aspiring tech founders, somebody might be listening out there. They have a great idea. They're working on getting it out of their head, and maybe they even have a way to get it to the world. If you had to give or could only give them kind of, here's one step that you don't want to miss, what would be that step? What would be the one practical thing that you would tell somebody that's thinking about going into this space?
So if they are a founder and they want to bring their idea out in the world, my number one advice is make your sale first before you do anything else. Find the client first before you build anything. Because your number one priority is to de-risk any work that you're going to do after. Engineers, including myself, anybody who knows how to do a thing well, we are guilty of defaulting to doing the things that we are great at because it feels good. We are not doing the things that need to be done to grow the business. If you are an accounting person, you're probably going to focus on how to do accounting because you know how to do this. You'll feel productive. If you're an engineer, you'll probably focus on how to build devices or write code because it's productive. None of those activities are marketing or sales or getting clients. The reason they're not being done is because we have a preference for doing things we're not good at. And once we try them, we hate it because we already have an expectation that if we do something at our expertise level, we'll feel good about ourselves. We forgot what it's like to feel bad about ourselves doing something. And if you've never done sales, if you never captured a client, if you've never done marketing, well, guess what? For the first year or two, you're going to feel terrible about the things that you're learning if you're going to rank yourself at the same level of expertise that you are in your own craft.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I've never really thought about it. Well, one of the things that I often tell solopreneurs, entrepreneurs that are getting started is, and even myself, I try to take one day a week to work on my business, not in my business. That's just kind of how I word that. But what I never really thought about is that people just aren't used to feeling bad about themselves. You might be a great public speaker, and that's what you're really good at, and you're not great at sales. So how do you get yourself out there to be a public speaker? And so you never, and I guess that would be just a kind of a follow-up question. How many people stop at that step? How many people get to those uncomfortable things and say, it's not that important? How many great ideas are out there that are never going to come to the world because somebody won't go past what they feel uncomfortable with? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and this is a familiar saying, it goes back to the beginner's mind, because anything new that you're learning, you will be learning from scratch. And if you remember the last time you learned something from scratch, it was painful. Now, for many of us who are professionals in what we do, we already forgot what it felt like. But be kind of accepting of your own trials and tribulations and lower that plank for the original things that you want to learn. Now, there's also might be an internal conflict that a lot of people in the world told you how smart you are, how efficient you are, how great you are at the thing that you do. And when you start doing something else and it doesn't feel that way and you're not good at it yet, you start questioning yourself. Well, I'm smart, I'm capable. Why can't I do this thing right away very well? Well, that's a false equivalence. You cannot be good at playing violin if you never played any kind of instrument if you're really good at math. Find those things that you guilting yourself with and cancel them because they're not true. You're good at the things you are good at, and the other things sometimes are not transferable. So in a sense, like, understand what you're being frustrated with when you're trying to learn a new thing. And you can easily remove those frustrations by accepting of who you are and the stage you're at, and give yourself time to learn. And if it's very important for you to learn fast, hire a coach, hire a professional, find somebody who's done this before, let's say 2 years ahead of you, and they'll give you an accelerated version of that course. But it will take time for that skill to be absorbed. It's not going to be as fast as anything you have mastered already right now in practicing. I'm sure many of you who are thinking about this have been already practicing your craft for 20 years at the very least. And that's a lot of time. And if you're expecting yourself to be so good at something in 2-3 weeks, I mean, maybe some of you will. I mean, listen, there's a lot of geniuses out there, but most of us will not. Like, I know if I will pick up the piano, and even though I know how to play guitar, it's going to take me years before I can play like a good song without like thinking about what keys to press. And we need to be more nice to ourselves when we're entering new and difficult challenges. So kind of going back to your original question, the first thing that you should do if you're starting a business is actually make a sale, not a product. Because in the end, you're solving somebody else's pain. You need to ask a question. Do you have this pain? Or what kind of pains are you having? So then you can go back to your drawing board and solve for that pain. Because otherwise you're going to be a product looking for the market, and the market might not exist for the product that you have created. You might be the only person who might be the market for that.
So you've just made me feel better because, I don't know, several months ago I decided that I have a small amount of knowledge around writing code. And I thought, well, I'm just going to create my own app. And I was pretty frustrated when it took me 3 days to get to Hello World. And so now I'm feeling much better about getting to Hello World in 3 days. So,
Listen, probably like fast by a lot of standards. Because if you think about like 10 years ago, probably would have taken longer because the AI was not available to help.
Exactly. No, I'm half kidding. Well, I'm serious that I get it. I think that you can become frustrated, and I've never really thought about the fact that it's just because you've forgotten what it's like to learn something from scratch. So I really like that. So for the folks listening, maybe there's somebody out there struggling to cross the divide. How can they connect with you? How can they leverage resources that maybe you have available?
That is a great question, Amos. I have reserved a special link. If it could be visited on humaninterfaces.co/podcast, and I will make available a complimentary coaching session for any of your listeners who are interested.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to have that in the show notes, and we encourage all of our listeners, if this is resonating with you, you should reach out. So we end every episode with kind of 3 rapid fire questions. The first question is derived from many years of working with employers, working with folks that are thinking about starting businesses. And one of the common things I hear is the generation that is coming out of high school today don't have X, or when I was in school, we learned about this, or, I really wish young people coming into my business had this. And I thought, what a great opportunity to ask leadership experts from around the world if we could bring all of the school administrators in the world into one room and have them in front of us, and you had a moment to give them one suggestion of something that they should add or include in a student's career to help create a better prepared graduate for the world and for the workforce, what would that one thing be?
Learn how to speak with people who are outside of your immediate circle. So how can you speak with a stranger? I'm not talking about stranger danger. Let's say you meet somebody at the conference. Let's say you meet somebody at the summer camp. Let's say you meet somebody on the street who's friendly. How can you get to know them better right away? What kind of questions would you ask? How can you understand the other person better? Because creating that relationship will propel all of your activities in the future. You're going to be able to relate to others much better, including people of your own circle. And if you ever go in business, that will help you get the first sale.
I like it. Second question, over your career, what has been a go-to book for you that you've continually went back to and it continues to give you good insight?
Your Brain at Work by David Rock is a fantastic book that I have read 3 times, and every single person who I recommend it to thanked me for recommending it. Now, I have not endorsed by David Rock, but it's quite a moving book for if you want to understand how your mind works and makes decisions.
Awesome. And the last question, which might be unfair for you because you've spent some time in the tech world, but in today's ever-changing world of technology, apps, programs, new gadgets coming out, what is your most useful piece of technology that you're using today?
Most recently, I have acquired a wallet tracker. It's basically a credit card size thing that you can insert in your wallet. And if you cannot find your wallet, which sometimes I cannot, like 5 minutes before I have to leave the house, it saves me half an hour to find that wallet because I can just ping it and it tells me exactly where it is.
That's awesome. Vladimir, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. Hopefully, maybe we can have you back on in the future. I think we could probably talk about a few of those things for an extended period of time, but thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Amos.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes, and don't forget to follow us on whatever platform you're listening so you get alerts when the new episodes come out. Until next time, we appreciate all of you.